And I'm incredibly honored that you asked me to speak tonight. And yeah, when I heard Liz chose the same passage as me, I was shocked, but not amazed, because this is what God does. Sometimes he just picks a point and he hammers it home, you know? So I'm just going to say a quick prayer. Okay, God, I'm here as your servant tonight. Make me a channel. Use me. You're the director. I'm the actor. Just feed me my lines, God. Feed me my lines. Amen. So I'm going to qualify just a little bit. My first sobriety date was December 7th, 1991. And that was 4 years after I had received a telephone call from my father. Now, my father was a raging alcoholic my whole life. And in this call, he very simply said to me, I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous now, and I'm calling because I want to make amends to you. I was a terrible husband and I was a terrible father, and I'm sorry about it. And I just started to cry. And I had not seen my father in years. The last I had known, he was a homeless drunk in Las Vegas, Nevada. And this was God inspired. What came out of my mouth were these words: let's just start over. And that's what we did. That is what we did. And so when my alcoholism started to reach scary proportions and I started doing scary stuff, I did not hesitate to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, because I thought any organization that could bring about that type of change in that man, that's a place where I want to go. And so I went into a room in Oswego, New York, where I was going to college, and I said, I think I might be an alcoholic. And I started to cry, and all the old men in that room started to laugh, because I had been going to that meeting with my boyfriend, because my boyfriend was an alcoholic and he needed a ride because he didn't have a license, and it was freaking cold there. And I didn't want to wait in the car for an hour. So I would sit in the meeting, and they all said this to me: no one gets to Alcoholics Anonymous by accident. And I was like, what? But I couldn't quit, you guys. I couldn't quit. So I went to rehab. I went to Halfway House, and I started my sobriety in Syracuse, New York. I went to a hall there, and I did everything these people told me to do, right? I got a sponsor. I got a home group. I cleaned ashtrays. I sat and smoked. I did it all, right? I went to a lot of meetings. But I'm here to tell you what I didn't do, and that was work the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't own a big book. For whatever reason, I wrote inventory on this, y'all, right? Because I'm like, what is wrong with those people, And it wasn't those people. I just wasn't ready, And I ended up, my addiction, it morphs. This is what happens. The spiritual malady is the problem, right? Alcohol was not my problem. Bottles are just a symptom. Right? And so the spiritual malady morphed into sex and love addiction. And I had 2 AA babies. So now I'm raising 2 AA babies on my own. And my spiritual malady morphed into food addiction. So I gained 100 pounds. 100 pounds, that's a lot of weight. And I became extremely codependent on my children. And I was Mr. Carpet Flippers. I didn't want to drink because I wanted to raise my children in a home that there was not active alcoholism going on, because I knew the calamity that exposed children to, and I didn't want to be like that. So I was just hanging on, because I got a resentment. I stopped going to meetings, and I thought, well, God's the answer anyway. I'll go to church. But here's the problem with church. Those people didn't understand me, and I was all blocked up with resentments. I couldn't feel God. I sat in church. I taught Bible study. I did it all, you guys, right? But it just wasn't getting in. There was concrete around my head and nothing could get through. My heart was solid stone, right? I was going through the motions, and I didn't understand why my life wasn't getting better. So mercifully, in September of 2012, a lot of stuff happened all at once, you guys. And that night I went out and I got drunk, stoned, and laid. And it was, the first time in a really long time for any of that stuff. And it started me on a 5-year relapse, you guys. But I wouldn't say it was a relapse, because was I ever really in the program to begin with? You know what I mean? But I thought AA didn't work. I was devastated. I didn't understand why A didn't work on me. Was I that bad? Was I that wrong? Was I marked lousy? Did God just hate me that much that all my efforts didn't, and honestly, I'm going to tell you right now, I wanted to die. I wanted to die. I really did want to die during that relapse. I burned my life to the ground. 9 out of 10 of my not yets came true. And, it was bad. And so here's where, I'm just going to talk a little bit about, what I thought about God at that point. When I was a little child, I can remember being in the closet and praying, oh God, please fix my mommy and daddy. And I was pissed. I was like, where were you, God? Why weren't you there? How dare you not answer that cry, warped lives of blameless children? Where were you? And so I thought he had abandoned me. So now I've lost a lot of friends, right? I'm 56 and I always hung with the partiers, right? That was like my biggest camouflage, to surround myself with people who partied just as hard, if not harder than I did, right? And so my friends are dying, right? They're starting to drop like flies. So I go to a funeral of a guy that I dated in college. And I'm waiting in line, I was raised Catholic, waiting in line to pray in front of the coffin. And all of a sudden I hear a voice in my ear, just as clear as day. And it said this: he died, but you don't have to. And I turned my head because I fully expected to see a human being there, and there was no person there. My knees went to jelly, and I bumped the lady in front of me, and she said, are you all right? And I said, I don't know. I really don't know. So thank God one of my baby daddies was still sober after all that time and living in Syracuse, New York, and had made amends to me, living and regular. I mean, he had been there for me. He was my one phone call when I got arrested, right? And anyway, I called him and I said, this is what just happened. Am I sane? And he basically said what the doctor said to Bill: anything's better than the way you were. Where are you? And he came and got me. And that night I ended up in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in Skinny Atlas, New York. And, I haven't had a drink since. And that date is my sobriety day is March 15th, 2017. And so, 34 years to get 8. But it's all right because God was holding me, you guys. Those 5 years that I was out there that I thought God had abandoned me, he had not abandoned me. He was there. He was there all along. He was keeping me alive when I wanted to die. So I get sober. This time I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to rehab. I don't know, about these meetings. I don't want to go to these meetings because I thought I don't want to listen to people complain about their problems for an hour, but I still went back to the meetings anyway, but I started listening to speakers online and I was like, wow, where do these people go to meetings? I want to go to meetings where they're going to meetings, Sandy Beach, Mark Houston, people like that. I was like, where Earl H., where's this guy going to meetings? I want to go to those meetings, And then I got sick. And at the emergency room, they gave me this drug called ciprofloxacin. Don't ever take it. That's the only reason I mention it. Please don't ever take any of the fluoroquinolines. Because what happened was a bomb went off in my body, and suddenly, overnight, I was allergic to literally everything. My house had mold in it. I knew my house had mold in it. I was working on trying to get it remediated and all that, like you do when you're responsible and sober, I was getting estimates and all that. Anyway, no, I was bedridden. I became bedridden after this. My Achilles tendons were ruptured, and I was suddenly allergic to every chemical on the planet. I mean, everything. Anything with a fragrance, I had to get it out of my house. So now I can't go to meetings because I try to go to meetings, and people in there are wearing perfume, and I'm starting to have I neglected this part. I had anaphylaxis. In the ER, I had anaphylaxis. So they had to, do this stuff to me, EpiPen and all that. But then I started getting this anaphylaxis over and over. And I had it 3 times. I had anaphylaxis. It would start with my lips would swell. Then my tongue would swell. Then what's next? My throat's going to swell. And that's scary as heck. So I'm like, okay, God, I'm praying and I'm asking God, help me. I don't know what to do. So in the meantime, I'm going to meetings on the telephone because this is before the pandemic. This is 2018. And I don't understand why, God, why did you only give me one good year? You know, I was doing your will. I was, you know, and I had to, this is where the book says, be quick to see where religious people are right. Make use of what they offer. And so this is what I did. I was like, nobody's talking about this level of suffering in Alcoholics Anonymous. If I can't, I gotta stop. My sponsor fired me because she's like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. This is beyond my pay grade, you know? So I started looking to religious people, right? And I stumbled across this lady. I started Googling, you know, people who talk about suffering. And I ran across this lady, Elizabeth Elliot, and she was a missionary, and she talks a lot about suffering. And one of the things she said, here's her definition of suffering. Suffering is having what you don't want or wanting what you don't have. So for me, suffering was having something I didn't want, which was a broken down body, right? And wanting something that I didn't have. I wanted to be healthy. I wanted to go to meetings. I wanted to be the head of the entertainment committee at the local AA hall, like I used to be. I wanted to go to conventions and dance all night and go to meetings. You know, I wanted that life. I wanted to go back to work. I used to be a teacher. So I was suffering, and I was suffering bad. And I had all this help because I'm from New York. I was living in New York. I had nurses and all kinds of, and this nurse is telling me, listen, we're going to have to put you in a nursing home. If you have another one of these anaphylactic episodes, we're going to have to put you in a nursing home because you can't walk and you can't live alone like this in, you know, out here. And that scared the hell out of me. So I started researching, you know, I took it to God, and I was like, and God just kept saying the same word over and over. Seek, 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 seek. And I'm like, seek. Okay, I'm seeking, you know. So anyway, I stumbled across these people called mold avoiders, and they were saying all this stuff that mold was making it worse and blah, blah, blah. Long story short, I had another anaphylactic reaction. And that time, instead of calling 911, I walked out of my house. I stripped my clothes off. I got in my vehicle, and I headed for the hills. And I decided to try this thing that these people were doing that was getting them better, called extreme mold avoidance. And what this involved was living off the grid, away from electricity, so that I couldn't get poisoned by dryer sheets, living, you know, where there was clean air, like in the trees, in the desert. And so this is what I did. I started by camping in Lake Placid, New York. Then I camped in Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. And all this time, I was talking to Alice about this because I'm like, this sounds crazy, Alice. And God was saying, do you trust me? This is what God is saying. Do you trust me? You guys, no one ever rings my doorbell, but my doorbell just rang. I'm going to ignore it. Do you trust me? And I'm like, I have to, God. I need to breathe, right? I can't breathe in my house. I can't breathe when my neighbors do. I need to breathe. So every night I need to pray to God. When I was out there in the wilderness for 13 months, I had to pray to God and ask him for a safe place to camp, because I'm like, okay, God, I need to camp next to someone who's not going to be using these off whatevers. You know what I mean? That spew toxins. And so it was like, God, there's a needle in a haystack. Oh, right. Now my dog's, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm busy. I'm busy. Okay. I'm so sorry, you guys. I'm so sorry. I just adopted these little dogs. Anyway, so God kept me safe. He kept me safe when I was in the wilderness. And then, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Come here. I'm sorry. So he kept me safe in the wilderness, and just kept saying, trust me. And I went to meetings when I could. And then I heard about this workshop where people work the steps in a deep way. and it was called Big Book Awakening. And I really wanted to do it. And I tried doing one of Donna Jay's workshops when I was on the road, but I couldn't do it because I didn't have consistent phone service because I was off the grid, you know. So finally, I met this woman, and she invited me to rent a room in her home. You guys, I didn't even know if I could live inside of a home again. I didn't know what was going to happen, you know, but I tried it. I prayed about it, and I tried it. And so that's how I landed in Pahrump, Nevada. It's in the Mojave Desert. And so I went through this Big Book Awakening workshop, and I did this really deep 4th and 5th step, and that cleared out the channel between me and God, you know? And so this is what I know now, right? When every single morning I have to start my day, right? Because my daily reprieve is contingent on daily maintenance of my spiritual condition. I can't rest on my laurels, you guys. I can't, because if I do, I know what's going to happen, right? I'm going to head right for the bar. I'm going to head right for the other things that are unmentionable in this meeting, right? And I'm going to head for the men. I'm going to head for death. So basically, it's just drinking and using is just a slow suicide. That's all it is, really. You know, we can call it the third option, right? If we want to. But so that's what I have to do. I have to do that in every single minute of every single day because I'm not 100% better. Okay. And when Alice asked me to speak, this was before I just had brain surgery. Okay. So I have done everything to get better. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff, you guys, right? Unmentionable, like crazy stuff to try to get better, because I don't have money, right? I've been on disability since 2015. So I can't go to these fancy doctors. So it's all been God leading me. Okay, God, what do you think? Should I try this supplement? Should I try this herb? And God's just been leading me. And all the while continuing to do the steps and continuing to remove the blocks between me and God. Writing self-defeating beliefs. I didn't even know I had self-defeating beliefs, but I had a lot of self-defeating beliefs. And I still have some self-defeating beliefs. I still have fear. Fear is like the chief activator of all these character defects that I have, right? So anyway, so then I started getting worse. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I was writing some inventory about men, about how much I hate men, and I was talking to God about it, and all of a sudden, you guys, I spiked a fever of 104. So I ended up in the ER in Las Vegas. That was on October 24th. And so the next thing you know, I'm in front of a neurosurgeon. Now, I don't have such a high opinion of doctors because I've been in and out ever since I started getting sick in 2012. You know, I've been in and out of so many doctors' offices, and they really just treat me like I'm crazy, pat me on the head, and want to send me on my way. So so this doctor comes in, he's a neurosurgeon, right? And he says, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Syracuse, New York." And I said, "Well, you know, I'm from Plattsburgh, New York, but I lived most of my life in Syracuse, New York." And he goes, "Oh, Sutter's Mill on Monday nights." And I go, "Grateful Dead night." And he smiled, and I said, "And Cosmos Pizza afterwards." So this guy, you guys, back in the day, I used to be a Deadhead, hugely into the Grateful Dead. I kind of stopped listening to him when I got clean and sober, but anyway, this guy was a Deadhead, and I instantly trusted him. Because of that, I instantly trusted him. And so that's a God wink. That was God. My body, as soon as he said that to me, my body was so tight before that. My body relaxed because I was like, see, that's my higher power right there. He's got me in the palm of his hand. He brought me the right surgeon at the right time. And he goes, "All right, now let's get down to business. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drill 2 holes in the top of your head." And I'm like, and he's like, "And if that works, I'm going to cut the back of your head and put this thing called a shunt in there. And it's going to help your brain to drain because you have hydrocephalus. You probably had it all your life." I'm like, "What?" "Yeah," he said, "because you have a cyst in your brain and it looks like to me like it's a birth defect. I'm not sure. We can't be 100% sure about this, but that's what it looks like to me right now. Now, if that doesn't work, the holes in your head, then we're going to have to fly you to LA and we're going to have to cut the cyst out." But he said, "That's really risky and you might end up a vegetable. So you're going to need a durable power of attorney before the surgery." I'm like, so I call, so I do this. I get my son. He's the durable power of attorney, all this, da-da-da. But I was calm. He just dispensed this, grace upon me. I can't explain it. he was holding me. I knew he was there. You know, it was like I could hear, you guys, my higher power is a shepherd, and he's a good shepherd, and he speaks to his sheep, and his sheep hear his voice. You know what I mean? And I was hearing his voice. I was in the ICU for like 10 days, and they drugged me. They put me on all kinds of drugs. I didn't want any drugs. I'm going, I don't want any drugs. And the doctor just like laughs at me. He's like, you have to take the drugs. And I'm like, for how many days afterwards? And he said, at least 4 days afterwards. So 4 days after the surgery, I start refusing the opiates. I'm like, no, I don't want those anymore. I I don't like them. And even just the short time I was on them, you guys, coming off of them, I was sick, but God was with me, and he was there, and he was holding me. And the reason I picked this particular spot in the 12 and 12 that says God does move in a mysterious way, his wonders to perform, is because that is the title of a hymn. And one of the things that has helped me get through all of this is my form of meditation is hymns. I just love them. I just love them. I don't know how else to say it. When I was in the wilderness, I used to sing hymns like all day. Any ones that I knew by heart, I would sing them all day, every day. I listened to them. I breathe them in. I take a deep breath. I repeat this is how I meditate. I either repeat a line from the good book, a line from the big book, or the line from a hymn. And so when I saw that, guys, I got to read you the words to this hymn, because this is amazing. This is like, you can't tell me that Bill W. wasn't inspired by this hymn. God moves in a mysterious way, his wonders to perform. He plants his footsteps in the sea and rides upon the storm. Deep in unfathomable minds of never-failing skill, he treasures up his bright designs and works his sovereign will. Ye fearful saints, fresh courage take. The clouds ye so much dread are big with mercy and shall break in blessings on your head. Judge not the Lord by feeble sense, but trust him for his grace. Behind a frowning providence, he hides a smiling face. His purposes will ripen fast, unfolding every hour. The bud may have a bitter taste, but sweet will be the flower. And all I can think of is 4:17, you guys. Acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I'm disturbed, it's because some fact of my life, right? It's not measuring up. But nothing, absolutely nothing, happens in God's world by mistake. And all of that suffering that I've been through, and it's not over yet. I still have the chemical sensitivities. I still cannot go into a room of Alcoholics Anonymous. I still cannot go into a church. I still cannot go into a store, you know? I still have to worry when my neighbors do laundry. But I'm not dead, and I can breathe. And now I have a roof over my head, right? God has provided for me every single step of the way. I mean, it has been so miraculous. This apartment that I'm living in right now, because technically, you know, I was homeless, even though I owned a house, I couldn't live in it. I was homeless. So then the house sold, and I was still homeless. So I got on a list for a voucher or whatever, right? And I was basically what they called couch surfing, because I was living with this chick and I was paying her some money every month, right? But I thought to myself, how am I ever going to go from being homeless to living in a house again? Like, I don't have anything. All I own is what's in my duffel bags in my van, you guys. I was living in a van in the wilderness, you know? And God provided there too, right? Because technically I went to Death Valley National Park. You're only supposed to be able to stay 2 weeks in a national park. But while I was there, the camp host and I would be bullshitting every day. And he's like, hey, we need a camp host at this other camp. Why don't you check it out? So I became a camp host. Because of that, I was able to live for 6 months for free in Death Valley National Park. You know what I mean? These are the types of things that he's done to provide for me, to hold me up when I was falling. You know, every single crack that I fell through, he shored it up somehow. I don't know how he did it, but he did. So this woman whose house I was living in, she decided to buy a house in New Mexico. And I thought, all right, I'll just live in my van again. But that wasn't God's plan, right? So right before, like a month before she closed on her house, I get a thing in the mail that I got approved for a housing voucher. And I was like, oh, well, they're never going to take it for this apartment. Like, this is a nice apartment, you know? And they did. So I'm able to live here, you guys. I'm able to afford it. You know what I mean? Yes, I'm still on disability. I want to work again. But little by little by little, now that I've had this brain surgery, okay, so this brain surgery and this hydrocephalus, it was an underlying condition. It made it all worse. It's not gone, right? It's not gone. What happened to me, it's not completely gone, but I think, like, I'm thinking of my health like a bucket, and that filled my bucket up about halfway. You know what I mean? So I think that God is slowly, and I don't know for sure, the last words that I heard, like, you know, like that one, like, leave the living to the living and the dead to the dead. I cry out to God all the time, like, show me what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't trust doctors, God. Help me, you know, help me. And the last thing that God told me was, make friends with your body. I'm like, make friends with my body? How am I supposed to do that, God? So I Googled it. How do I make friends with my body? And I see this dude on there who has a YouTube channel. It's called Somatic Safety Method. And I'm like, okay. So I start watching these videos about this guy that's teaching people how to feel safe in their bodies. And then I realize I'm in therapy, right? I got into therapy, and therapy never worked for me before, but now I'm in this therapy. But gee, maybe because I'm actually being honest with the therapist now, right? Maybe because the resentments are gone now, I'm actually able to be in this EMDR therapy, that's trauma therapy. So that's helping and that's working. And I'm day by day by day, and then I just have to talk about step 12, because step 12 it's the continuation of my step 11. You know what I mean? Like, I have to give this away. I need to work with others just as much as I need oxygen, and I need oxygen to live. And so I'm going to say my phone number is 518-319-5325. So if you're listening to this recording and you want to call me and you want to work steps, call me. I will work steps with you. I now understand that I was never meant to be sponsor reliant like I was back in the 90s, right? I was sponsor reliant. And then when my sponsor screwed me over, I hated AA, right? No, I was supposed to be God reliant all along, right? I'm not supposed to be sponsor reliant. I'm supposed to be God reliant. My sponsor is just a vehicle, just a tool in God's hands to lead me to my own experience so that I can have this right here, right? This spiritual experience. This is what I need to survive. Hold on, I'm looking at my time. How much time do I have left?
Yeah, you have 8 minutes left.
8 minutes. Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, I want to talk really quick about other things that I've held on to. The book said this: when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. I wrote that down. I repeated it over and over. I was like, this is a spiritual problem. When this spiritual malady is overcome, I turned it into like a credo, if you will. I will straighten out mentally and physically. And I believe that I'm in the stage now of straightening out mentally and physically. I'm in that stage now. I'm not all the way there. I may never be all the way there, right? I may never be completely 100% well. But here's the thing. I can accept it now, right? At one point when I was so sick that I was bedridden, I thought, you know what, Lord, if you're just keeping me on this earth to pray for other people, if that's the only reason I'm here, I can work steps flat on my back. And I have. When I was bedridden, I have worked steps with people laying flat on my back. I can work steps from this bed. I can pray for people from this bed. If that's my purpose, if that's all the reason that you have me, my heart beating still, okay, I'll take it. Have there been moments where I've cried out to God and said, please just take me home? I'm tired. Yes. Yes, there have. I'm tired. I'm sick of being this way. I want to be surrounded by people, you know, I mean, and I can't be surrounded by people that are covered in fragrance, that are covered in dryer sheets even. I can't go into a room where people use a whole bunch of different, because everything's fragrance. Think about it. Every product that you use has a fragrance in it, you know. And my big problem is doctors. Even at the doctors, you guys, they're using these toxic fragrances, and I don't have access to health care. So, and one time when I was in the wilderness, God said to me, I said, why, God, why? And he said, because the canaries need the 12 steps. Because these canaries, people like me, that's what we call ourselves, human canaries, people who are allergic to all these chemicals, mold, pesticides, all this stuff. You know, you might not have believed in this before today. You might have just been like my doctor and said, this is just a psychiatric disability. No, it's not. My doctor has looked at my genes. You know, I did my raw genetic data. She's looked at my genes and she said, oh, right here's the gene that says you don't process alcohol well. I'm like, oh yeah, I knew that one. You know, right here's the gene that says you don't process chemicals well. But the thing is, these genes don't have to be expressed. It was only because I put my body through so much with that 5-year relapse, right? All the trauma, everything I was doing and everything that I went through, put my body through so much that those genes became expressed. But I believe that God knit me together in my mother's womb. He knit those genes together. And because he did that, he can go back in there and he can re-knit them and he can fix them if it's his will. It might not be his will. Right? It might not be, but whatever his will is, I'm so grateful for Zoom because of Zoom, I can interact. Thank you, John. I see it. Because of Zoom, I can interact with you guys. Right? And I love the steps. To me, the steps are like a diamond, right? And I want to look at it from every facet. I want to see all the facets of the diamond and I want the light to shine through it. And I want the rainbows going on the wall. I want to see those rainbows going on the wall. So I'm going to work the steps in different ways and I'm going to work them with different people and I'm going to allow God to shine through and make those rainbows. And I believe he does that. To me, the rainbow is just God just keeping his promises, you know, and you know, I mean, the big book, I just believe it's kind of like, it's just as inspired to me as the Bible is. You know, I love the Bible and everything like that. And I love Jesus, but without the big book and without you people, I can't access that stuff. I can't access religion. I need you guys to be my mirrors. I need to be able to read you my 10 steps and have you tell me, that's your ego, right? That's your pride. I need you guys to do that for me. Church people can't do that. You know, I can love church people and I do, but they can't do for me what you guys do for me because they're not walking. They don't have a gun to their head, right? We have a gun to our head. We have to follow God day in and day out because if not, the gun's going to go off, you know, and I need that gun. I needed that suffering too. As much as I hate it, as much as I hate the suffering, as much as I'm sad, but it's put me in my dark past and his hands is my greatest asset. And it really is my greatest asset. So thank you so much again, Hollis, for letting me share. And thanks everyone who is here listening and supporting me. I love you all.
Mike, you are up first. Thank you, my friend. Please come in.
Yeah, thank you all. Hi, everybody. My name's Mike. I'm an alcoholic. And thank you so much for your share. My question is, you mentioned something that I also went through the BBA process with Pat T. And one of the things that I got from that was the God reliance versus sponsor reliance. And I didn't hear, do you still work with a sponsor? And if you do, what do you do with that sponsor as part of your recovery?
Good question. So I do have, I do still technically have a BBA sponsor. I haven't talked to her in a while, Stephanie Blackman. You know, we keep in touch, but I don't call her with problems and things like that. I have actually called her when I had a question about a sponsee, when I didn't know what to do about something that was going on with a sponsee, you know, but just recently too, another thing is I'm going through the steps, with Cameron F's workbook. It's actually CA, I think, which is not a drug specific fellowship. And, And so like I'm going through the steps again. And so I have a sponsor in that program in Spiritual Gangsters. I have a sponsor right now and she's taking me through the steps. You know, that's the role of a sponsor, right? Is to take us through the steps. So I'm still going through steps and I'm still using a sponsor to take me through the steps. So I think that answers your question. Thank you for asking it.
Thanks, Mike. Sally, come on in.
Hi, Michelle. My name's Sally. I'm an alcoholic. And Michelle, thank you for such a mind-blowing share. I've really never heard anything like that. I do have a question. Before I ask it, I just want to share what we share. For one thing, you're the age of my daughter who died of cancer 8 years ago. So right there, you know, and I was in the program for 17 years and then I went out for 20 years. So I know exactly what you're talking about because, yeah, I had a big book, but I didn't work the steps in anything more than a half-assed fashion. So what I wanted to ask you about was I'm working on my fourth step and I am now reaching the sexual inventory part, and I fucked over a lot of guys in my life, and the thing that is really troubling to me that I have to get right with God about is that I don't feel guilty about it, or you know, guilt is a big thing with me, and seeing the resentments really helped me see where I was expecting that I was perfect. And so, you know, realizing that that was the complete insanity that I had in my head has helped me see more what God wants me to do. But the thing about all of my past with men is really, I'm at a loss of where I'm going to go there. And I know that I will be working with my sponsor on it. But when I heard you talk about, you know, your experiences, I just had to ask you, you know, how have you been doing with that?
You mean how are you asking me how I did my sex inventory? I'm confused about what you're asking. Well, I can't hear you now. I think you're muted.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, that and were you able to make amends with any of them?
Okay, good question. So, you know, some I was able to make amends. However, I will say this. What happened was, you know, when I did the realization, you know, and the book says we were prepared, we've made an inventory and we were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle, right? And so we were looking at it from the realization for me around most of my sexual stuff was that, you know, I was just as bad. Like I thought I was a victim. I thought that all these guys were taking advantage of me, you know, but no, that wasn't true. I was using them like a drug. You know what I mean? And so, that's one of the reasons why I'm going through the steps again, right? It's because now I'm looking at this. I'm looking at that's just another way that the spiritual malady manifested itself in my life. And when I got sober, in 2017, I cut that shit out, right? I tried it for maybe like the first week. And then I was like, oh, this doesn't feel good. I can't do this anymore. So I have not had, to make, you know, a lot of amends in that area because of the fact that I stopped that behavior and most of that I lumped together. And the thing is, most of those people are married now. So I would be doing more harm contacting those people to make amends to them. Either that or they're dead. To be honest with you, a lot of my former lovers are dead now. So I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Sally, for the question. And Michelle, of course, thank you for the answer. My friend Emily. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Alice. Oh, Michelle, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful share. So much of your story is touched me and is a lot like my story. What I wanted to ask, though, is that you mentioned about the Big Book Awakening, taking a deeper dive into the steps. I'm very much interested in that. How would I go about that? And I wasn't fast enough with my pen to write down your number. I was wondering if you'd be willing to share that one more time as well. Thank you
Yeah,
again.
of course, Emily. I'll put my number in the chat, and I'll also put Big Book Awakening starts a new workshop every January. So I can, I'll put the websites, I'll put my number and I'll put the websites in the chat for you. Is that okay?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Bob.
Hi, Michelle, that was wonderful. After going through that and still like having that kind of devotion and excitement about your connection with your higher power, that's inspiring. That intro prayer, use me, speak through me, love that. A couple really cool things I like, at the end there, I needed the suffering, yeah, that seems like that's the only way that I learn. Like you can tell me do this or don't do that, but until like it hurts, I'm never willing to really do that. It sounded like, you're making the choice to be grateful for everything, good and bad. Because like you said, some of the worst things have been your spiritual path to where you are right now. But what really got me is you talked about the fourth and fifth step at cleaning this channel. That was kind of, it sounded like a breakthrough. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Like, that opening that channel in the fourth.
Yeah, good question. Thank you for it. Yeah, so I came up with this visual. I don't know if God gave this to me because he does speak to me. He gives me intuitions and intuitive thoughts. And I had this visual of like a junkyard. So just picture that your uncle dies and he leaves you a piece of property, but it's a junkyard. And you think, wow, this could be really nice if it was cleaned up, right? And so maybe the first time I went through the steps, they were hauling away, like the semis and the old rusty tractors. That was the first inventory, right? And then with the second inventory, now we're hauling away all the junk cars, and then the third one, it was like the lawnmowers and the old toasters and whatever. And now I'm down on my hands and knees picking through the grass, right? Getting rid of those, cause you don't want to run over that with your lawnmower. You don't want to run over screws and nuts and bolts. And so that's how I feel. I feel like there was just so much junk in my soul. And all of that junk was blocking me from God, and I'm not going to say that I'm not a saint. We aren't saints, right? But there's still stuff where I still get angry or I still am overwhelmed with fear. And I'm like, God, why, why did this happen or that happen? You know what I mean? And so, but ultimately I had placed myself in a position to be hurt, drunk or sober. I had placed myself in that position, and taking responsibility for that and knowing that God has loved me anyway. He's loved me anyway. He's delivered me and saved me anyway, even though I stupidly walked right into the trouble, invited it, I don't know. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Michelle. We have time for one more question. I would love to see another hand, one quick one. And seeing none, Michelle, I'm going to ask a question. So during the darkest times, during the, I don't even know if I can be in the state park. I'm out here in the wilderness alone, the food and water and access to Wi-Fi and all of it. When you look at the sentence that you chose, right? That when the hand of God seems to be heavy, in it there's a blessing. In the dark moment, did you have doubt?
Oh, yes, definitely. I had doubt. For sure I had doubt. And that one night that I described when God spoke and said the canaries need the 12 steps, that it was 22 degrees that night. I was freezing, literally freezing my ass off out there. You know what I mean? And this was at Mesquite Campground in Death Valley National Park, and there was no one around. You know, the campground was empty. And I was like, you know, God, I've been faithful. What's going on? You know, like, and I'll tell you another time that happened to me is I am also powerless over the effect that these chemicals have on my brain, because I just had a dark night of the soul, last Friday, Alice, to be honest, because I went to the neurologist and they had Glade plugins in the office, and those things, whatever's in them, it's very toxic to my brain. And I started crying and sobbing, and I ended up parked in front of a bar and saying to God, now God, tell me, why shouldn't I just go in there and get drunk and pick up some guy and show him a good time? Why shouldn't I do that, God? What the hell do I have to lose? You know? And like I said, I was mentally compromised, and this is where he held me. And of course I called a fellow, right? Of course I called a fellow and talked it out and cried and didn't walk into that bar and get that drink, because at that moment, my brain was so compromised by those chemicals that I actually thought death would be better. The third option, you know, because I'll tell you what, if I ever do relapse, that's really what it's going to be. It's going to be about me doing it so that I can die. And so just pray for me, y'all, because I really don't want to do that. And if I ever do that, it won't be because I'm in my right mind. Honestly. And I'm not mentally ill. They've checked me. You know what I mean? Like, it's these chemicals. They have an effect on my brain, not like other people, you know. Well, yes, like other people, like other canaries. So this is what I'm thinking about is, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I would like the canaries to have access to the 12 steps, because these people kill themselves because they can't see any hope, and they think that God has abandoned them, just like I thought God had abandoned me, you know. But I knew that God hadn't, because I had this design for living that works in rough going. I believe that's in Bill's story. Bill talks about that. You know, it's a design for living that works in rough going, and I've had rough going, right? And this design for living worked for me. So why couldn't it work? You know, another line in our book says that this way of life has its benefits for all. So why couldn't it work for other people who have multiple chemical sensitivities like I do? It could, I think. I don't know how God's going to do it, but maybe he's going to use me to do that. You know, maybe that's why he spared me all this time, you know? I don't know. But thank you for the question.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for being here. John, back to you.